Hi, welcome. This is a reading of Walking a Rainbow by me, Michael Shearer, about my son and I walking the Camino de Santiago when he was 9. This is chapter 18, called On the Way to Hell. It begins at the monastery of San Juan, where we had stayed the night. We left in mid-morning when the mountain mist had cleared. The four of us, Claudio, Bienvenida, Kez and I, walked quietly down a dirt path through oak forest, the scrunch of our footsteps on dry leaves echoing off the silent sentinel trees. Even the black redstarts made no sound. The path led out onto a plateau of parched grass, shrubs and a few trees, then down to the village of Ajes, a dilapidated place, the buildings patched with ill-matching repairs over many decades. We were greeted by an Alsatian dog at its margins, sniffing at a cowpat. It bit into the cowpat and munched heartily, thick green slime running down its jaws. "Doesn't that remind you of life?" said Kez, grimacing. On the road towards Atapuerca lay a long grey snake, I think a female viper. She appeared stunned, even slightly cooked by the livid heat. Claudio lifted her gingerly and carried her limp body to the grass by the roadside. The bar at Atapuerca was like a kitsch ranch. It was full of men in blue boiler suits tied at the waist by string, and old women in filthy housecoats. We ordered tortillas and beer from a scruffy woman who asked all the usual questions about Kez and gave him a valiente. She ogled at him in admiration. "Doesn't he speak good English for only 9 years old?" she enthused. We turned off the road for a steady climb up a path with outcrops of white and grey rock. At the climax of the ridge were a few stunted trees, like oaks, but with spiky leaves, and some gaunt, malnourished gorse. Wheat ears flitted about. Here the three of us rested in scanty shade, and took some very warm water. Kez made himself a raw garlic and Tabasco sandwich. Bienvenida arrived, and sank softly to the ground in a flurry of flesh just in front of me. She spoke at length in Spanish, finishing with the word Michael in an inviting, caressive tone, while simultaneously slipping one strap of her vest off her pristine shoulder, and pointing it towards me like an offering. The soft, rounded flesh lay exposed before me, deliciously pink and unblemished. She stretched her shoulder as if the muscles were weary and thrust it towards me. Sweet Jesus, she wanted me to massage her. I raised my hands in homage, prepared for the laying on of hands. Then she leapt up and screamed, as if stung. "I didn't touch her," I yelled. "I didn't touch her, honest. I just thought about it." "She wants you to pass her the water bottle," said Claudio, much amused. The wind blew a melancholy note, like the call of sirens, across the top of the bottle as I passed it. Beyond the ridge lay a vast panorama of undulating straw-coloured fields, with the entire city of Burgos on the horizon under a dirty haze. We lost the path on the descent and headed for the village of Bilbao. The fountain by the church had superb water, cold, and sweet. Down the street men did odd jobs wearing green boiler suits and slippers. One old woman in a blue housecoat and headscarf sat outside her house sorting 2 huge piles of sheep's wool. A string of small sleepy villages lay down the little used road. The bar of one of them was the dirtiest I have ever seen. There were flies everywhere. Flies on the counter, flies on the glasses, flies on the customers, who, like the landlord of the flies, didn't even bother to brush them off. A sordid sense of lethargy and hopelessness prevailed. In the midst of this filth, a young woman fed her infant with some brown gunk in a jam jar. The men decided to teach the snotty-nosed fat child to play dominoes. However, they didn't actually have any dominoes, or couldn't be bothered to get them, so they just imparted the basics, which consisted of bashing the flat of the hand down on the table while shouting a guttural and very loud cry. The kids soon got the hang of the skill, amid much amazement and immense general approval. We emerged into the heat of the day, so hot it caught the throat as we breathed. A dreary, weary walk to the bar at Villa Fria, which means, ironically, Cold Town. The television showed live motor racing at Brands Hatch. There was torrential rain under a grim grey sky. We had an ice cream. Just over the bridge across the motorway lay a barracks, designed like a fortress in the desert of North Africa, or a prison for the pathologically dangerous. Behind its barbed wire, bored and restless young men stood on its corner turrets, playing idly with their guns. The long walk into the substantial town of Burgos was terrible. Appallingly hot. Road all the way, a constant roar of heavy traffic amid turging fumes, and the occasional stink of a putrid factory. The glare hurt the eyes, the hard surface hurt the feet. We passed another barracks, its sentries toting automatic weapons. Next door, a school was being demolished. 2 more military establishments further along. We reached the city centre completely frazzled. The tourist office directed us to the cathedral to locate the Pilgrims' Refuge. There, vigilantes stood at the door checking people for excessive display of flesh. What they considered objectionable was completely arbitrary and seemed to depend on a whim. Bienvenida was naturally turned away. We inquired about the refuge and were directed to the tourist office. We hovered in the square outside the cathedral in a state of indecision. Then a cry caught our attention, and Otto, the Norwegian pilgrim, and his wife, who we had last met what seemed like weeks ago on our first day in Spain, came pushing through the crowd. After some hearty greetings, we explained our predicament. Otto was staying in a hotel, but the city was full of monasteries, convents, seminaries. Why, there was one almost opposite his hotel. We would stay there, he asserted firmly. He took us to the Seminario Major San Jerónimo. It was huge. A massive building looking more like the Ministry of Defence or the international headquarters for the Foreign Legion than anything religious. A high wall, then a car park like a parade ground, twin towers flanking the entrance, and either side row upon row of anonymous windows like something in Whitehall. We trooped up the imposing steps into a vast foyer. It was empty save for a receptionist. Here Otto launched into an impassioned account of what he thought of a religious institution which could not accommodate a few wandering pilgrims. After much heated debate, we were each given a room upstairs, down a long echoing corridor behind identical doors. Kes moved his mattress into my room and laid it on the floor. Then we went to get some food. We took our purchases to a park to cook. When I opened up a tin of meatballs, it stunk. I explained to Kes that continental food often contained herbs and spices strange to the English nostril. But when it was cooking, it smelt so foul I had to admit that the meat was seriously off. We had breathed in the fetid fumes. My stomach felt distinctly queasy. We decided to forego dinner till later. Much later. We turned in early that night, and after some restless, light sleep I lay awake, and I stayed awake well into the hot night, rampantly celibate, troubled by an obstinate, massive erection. I tried to lay back and think of England, Salisbury Spire, the Post Office Tower, Blackpool, Big Ben. In this tense state I heard the door quietly click and swing eerily ajar. The lithe shape of a slim young woman in a flimsy negligee slipped in and stood irresolute, silhouetted in the moonlit window. The gentle light slid through her diaphanous nightdress, delicately touching and revealing her dainty figure. My skin was electrified. "André?" she whispered in a soft, shimmering, breathy voice, very French. I slipped my mouth beneath the blanket and mumbled, muffled, feigning sleepiness, "Oui." I began to wonder whether André had a beard. She hesitated, as if the voice was not quite right, decided it was near enough, and began to glide towards the bed. Then she tripped over Kes's mattress. Kes responded with a shortened but expressive version of his impression of the rutting grunt of the Vietnamese pot-bellied pig. Now, I'm not absolutely sure what this nymph expected to find in my room. But whatever it wasn't a Vietnamese pot-bellied pig on a mattress on the floor in rutting mode. She appeared flustered, stepped back and swayed exquisitely. Oh, pardon," she said, and left swiftly. I stared at the lump on the floor that was Kes. There are times when the joys of fatherhood elude me. There was no sign of a glass slipper on the floor in the morning, no trace of fairy dust, no fragile vestige of the shed skin of a nymph, green and translucent like a lacewing. Only Kes, snoring slightly, sleeping like a hog, dreaming of Mars bars. I had a quick coffee and went out to see the cathedral. The concourse before the church was thronged with conmen and shysters, selling postcards and lucky heather and peacock's feathers, and flyboys hanging around looking shifty. The space had the feel of King's Cross Station, with its dubious men loitering ready to accost the wide-eyed young girl, new to the big city, fresh down from the north, naive and vulnerable. There were beggars at every church door. The vigilantes had already started their day's quarrels with the underdressed. They glowered and argued and disapproved, a picket of snarling conflict and ill feeling. I edged past them, trying to keep out of it. The cathedral tried too hard to impress. Like so much Spanish architecture, it is over-decorated, smitten with growths and sub-growths, like barnacles on a jetty. I'm a Cistercian at heart. In a chapel was the famous Santo Cristo, a crucifixion with a wounded and bloody Christ supposedly covered with human skin, though more likely that of a cow, which was supposed to require a shave once a week. Several dark side chapels, and one in particular was dimly replete with the glint of silver and gold, jewels and lapis lazuli, stacked with elaborate reliquaries, each harbouring a filigree snippet of a saint, once priceless, now stored like last year's fashionable Christmas gifts in the basement of a department store. Lost treasure in the recesses of this model of one mansion of the psyche. We have not outgrown the concept of the relic, merely seek them elsewhere. Elvis's wart is a collector's item. The impulse to obtain something from celebrity, even a signature, is alive and flourishing. Lest thou mock, O listener, examine the trivia of your own hobby horse. What would you give for, say, the pen of Keats, or the steering wheel of Fangio, the baton of Klemperer, or the trowel of Gertrude Jekyll? After the death of someone, all their possessions, from the most intimate to the peripheral, from an entire house to a matchstick, become charged with them and bereft of them both at once. A fountain pen or a paper clip will be imbued with the presence of the lost person. Each thing becomes transfigured with death. And yet the living presence has gone out of the objects as surely as if they themselves were living and had died. They are like absences in the world, as if they were made of some strange other matter unnatural to this place. I recall once seeing the teapot with which Mrs. Thrale consoled the morbid Dr. Johnson, a rotund, homely, capacious grail of a pot commensurate with his immense need. Someone rightly saved and treasured it, and it enlivened the man and his relationship. And once, in Ayrshire, memorably, I saw a small wooden spoon lovingly carved from a toilet seat upon which Robbie Burns had once sat. Now there's something to stir your tea with. You may laugh, but do you not keep safe and secret, in a recess of loft or cupboard, some mundane and worthless trinket, once intimately in contact with some long-lost lover, or father, or daughter? A cigarette that bears a lipstick's traces. I sought out the main post office to collect our mail. I recited the sentence the phrase book recommended and displayed my passport to the testy young man behind the appropriate counter. Without moving from his place, he assured me there was nothing. Thinking he had misunderstood my dreadful Spanish, I went through the whole charade again. He irritably skimmed through the contents of a pigeonhole and then ignored me and wandered off. I was irresolutely wondering what to do in the street outside when he came out of the building and hurried away, scowling. I went back in and tried again with the young woman who had replaced him, and was rewarded with a satisfying bundle of letters. In the symbolism of the Camino, Burgos is the gateway to hell. It is the portal to the Meseta, the severe core of Castile, an endless, almost waterless plain, dreadfully hot, bleak and testing. The Pyrenees incarnates the pilgrim's resolve to turn away from the comforts and securities of domestic life. Thereafter there is the reward of the realization of the riches of the simple, and glimpses of the holy city and its enlightened state of mind. Beyond Burgos comes a more demanding trial. Things get more serious. Back at the seminary, I refueled Kes with Mars bar and coffee and settled down to read my letters, precious links to another world. I took stock and tried to count up how far we had walked. I made it only 165 miles, scarcely a third of the distance to Santiago. A long way to go. I repaired my rucksack, took the straps in a bit and moved my belt along a notch to allow for the loss in weight. Kes watched. "Fat going down, eh, Dad?" "This is not fat, Kes." "What is it then? Looks like fat to me." "It is a gesture of solidarity with our pregnant sisters." "Well, other people call it fat." Claudio came in and presented us with some cakes. They were a parting gift. He had received a note from the film crew. I had forgotten all about them, summoning him to San Juan for some filming. He would be cruelly missed. Bienvenida had disappeared. Presumably she had left early. We never saw her again.